jumpsuit. So as you can see, I've made some reference lines here. From shoulder to this point is the bust line. From here is 4 inches below the hip line, and here is your knee line plus hemming allowance. So after making this reference line, we go on and start imputing our measurements. So I'm starting off with imputing the shoulder measurement, which I'm leaving at 7.5 inches. I'm going to make the same measurement on the bust line for reference purpose. So I'm marking the same 7.5 inches here, and I'm going to connect it to the shoulder. So now I'm going to impute my bust measurement plus 1/2 inch because it's a loose fitting wear. So on the hip line as well, that is 4 inches below the hip line, I'm going to make a hip line measurement there. And on the knee line, I'm going to mark the same thing I marked on the hip line on the knee line measurement. So the next thing to do now is to work on the armpit line. And what I'm going to do there is to mark 3 inches above the bust line, and I'm going to connect the bust measurement to the point, and I'm also going to mark 1/2 inch on the shoulder line for attachment of sleeve. So from there, I'm going to connect it up to the 1/2 inch I marked there. So now I'm going to move this forward to show you how to mark the rest of your measurement. Now on the hip line, you are going to add about 18 inches to the side. You add 18 inches like so. And on the knee line, you are going to add the same 18 inches here. And I'm going to connect these lines together. I'm going to connect both lines together. Then also I'm going to add 1 inch seam allowance at that outer side of your garment. So when I'm done with that, I'm going to connect the armpit measurement here down to the 4 inches below the hip line here, and then I'll add my 1 inch seam allowance and connect the lines. Let me go do that and I'll show you what it should look like. So here is what it should look like when you're done connecting your lines. So this is it, and I've also added 1 inch seam allowance here, connected it to the 1 inch seam allowance at the bottom line of the garment. So when you're done doing this, we'll go over to the next level. So right now we're going to work on the neckline. So I'm marking 4 inches or 4.5 inches width. You can mark as much as you need here. It's basically style. So here I'm going to mark 4 inches depth. So I'm going to connect a round neck measurement here. As you can see, you can change the neckline design style to your desire, and when you're done cutting out your pattern, it should look like this. So here I'm going to show you how to cut the back part of it. As you can see, I have marked out 1/2 inch at the center back here, and also I've marked 2 inches down the neckline, and I'm going to be cutting it off like so. And I'm going to open the back seam open because I'll be needing it to put my facing. So I've cut the facing for the front part of the dress, and this is the right side facing me, and I'm going to put the facing of the front bodies right side to right side, and I'm going to sew along the neckline like so. Now for the back piece, I've already cut out the interface for it, and as you can see, I've not slit open the interface because I need to use the reference point I marked at the back here to open it. So what I'm going to do before attaching the facing is to sew 1/2 inch down through the back piece. And another option to this is just to cut open down your back piece so that you don't have to go through the facing part, because in this garment you have to go in through the neck, so you need a lot of space to do that. But before we go over to the facing part, we need to develop a button holder for the back part of your garment. And what I just did here is to cut 1 inch here, and you sew down along it. When you finish sewing down along it, if you have something like this, you cut off the excesses, then you use your needle and thread and sew up the top, and from there you use the bottom of your needle, pass it through the hole, as you can see I'm doing here, and then you use the bottom of your needle to push in some of the fabric in, like so. You do this carefully not to injure yourself, so you be careful. And also remember not to stretch your thread so much so that it doesn't cut in the process. So as you can see, I'm already turning it out. So as you can see, I've already done this. So what you do is to fold this into 2 and sew onto the back neckline for the button holder. Now we're done doing the button holder, and I've also attached this here. So go over to the facing proper. So I'm just going to sew along the neckline like so, and I'm going to stop 2 inches before the reference point we marked at first, and make sure you don't sew on this point here. So let's go over to our machine and do the sewing. After you must have done that, as you can see, I've turned to the back of it, and I'm going to show you how to finish off this interface. So if you remember, we stopped somewhere 2 inches before we get to the finish line. As you can see, it's still open here. So what you have to do is to sew from this reference point here up to the other part of it. As you can see, I've done the same here. So you do the same to have a finished look, a good neat look to your interface. So you sew from here up to this point. So once you're done doing that, you should have something like this. Okay, now you're done with your interface. You can attach your button here. Now we're going to go over to the attaching the shoulder part of it. So what you do as usual is to get the front part right side to right side, put it together like so. When you grab all together, you flip the interface for the back piece over to the front, covering the other side of it. Then what you're going to do is to sew 1/2 inch on the neckline down to 3/4 of an inch at the shoulder line. After joining the shoulder, the next thing is to sew up the side seam, and you sew from here to here, and then from the here to the other side. Make sure you don't sew anything along this part, because this is the bottom of your pant. So after sewing it, you have to hem the bottom of your pant like so with the 1 inch we measured out for the hemming. So you sew along this part. Now we're going to be working on the sleeve part of it. I have a sleeve pattern tutorial already, and I'll put the link down below on the description box. So here, as you can see, I've marked out 1 inch before I placed my sleeve pattern. This is because of the kind of sleeve I'm going to be putting here. So I've also traced my sleeve pattern here, and as you can see from the bottom part, I measured in 2.5 inches more because I want some freeness on the sleeve part. So I'm going to be connecting it from here to here, and then I add my hemming allowance. So you go ahead and do it. This sleeve is about 22 inches long, and you can increase or decrease yours based on what you want to achieve. So here I'm done with cutting out my sleeve pattern. What I'm going to do is to sew down from here to here. That is 1 inches before the hemming part, and I'm going to open up the sides like so, and then I'm going to be folding it 1/2 inch to 1/2 inch in, and I'm going to sew along this part. So you do the same for the rest of the pieces. When you're done doing that, you should have something like this. Okay, and now what we're going to do next here is to join the side seam of the sleeve we've cut out. So you're going to be joining it here, and then after joining it, you are going to create a casing for our elastic. So I'm going to fold it like so. I'm using a 1 inch elastic, so I'm going to be folding in 1 inch. So here, when you're done folding in the casing for the elastic, you should have something like this, and make sure you leave a hole where you will pass your elastic in. And what I mean is this: you're going to be passing in your 1-inch elastic like so and take it around, and when you're done finding your size, you're going to fold it like so and sew on your sewing machine. Then you close the hole. So when you're done doing that, you should have something like this. Okay, the next thing to do is to overlap the heads of the sleeve and sew in like 1 inch down before you attach it to your sleeve. And before you do that, make sure you release some 1/2 inch here so that the sleeve will still balance. When you're done doing that, you attach it to your main garment and your jumpsuit is ready. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. Bye.